click the record. Hey, I think you just clicked the recording button. Thank you.
I
Hello,
did.
everybody, and welcome to the February 2022 meeting of the Central Florida Astronomical Society. Welcome back, everyone. Yes, we are virtual again. And just want to say again, no one wants to get back to in-person meetings more than we do. It's a lot of fun when we're there. Board meetings may stay virtual, but boy, the meetings where everybody gets together, we sure do miss that. We do have some outdoor events though this month, so there are opportunities to get together with your fellow astronomers. And our current target for getting back together at the planetarium is April. Next month, the whole school is actually shut down next month during our meeting time. So there wasn't even an opportunity to debate whether we should meet again. And the school will be fully open again in April. The planetarium will be fully open again in April. And so it's probably a month longer than we might even have done it. But April looks pretty good so far. Again, unless the next variant and the monkeys in San Diego start talking, we should be good to go for April. So we have a meeting tonight, another virtual meeting after the standard announcements and events. We'll have some member astrophoto showcases. Boy, there's some great astrophotos were sent in this month. Some people had some nice weather and opportunities. I'm going to spend just a minute on the moon, like I always do. Mauricio, our new outreach chair, missed the board meeting because it was in the dry Tortugas. It's one of my favorite places to go and do astronomy. It's actually just one of my favorite places to go and camp as well. And he's going to tell you about his adventure down there. Sharife is going to talk about the overview effect, and I'm going to let her explain what that is about. John Pinto is going to do Where Am I?, which I suspect may have a little math in it. And then Mauricio is going to do our latest outreach news. So it is mini program extravaganza tonight with our many people here at CFAS who are very talented and very active in their communities. And I just want to say I've seen some interesting posts on the Groups.io. Speaking of Groups.io, that is our official, communications mechanism for interclub communications online. I've seen some pretty interesting things on there about things that some of our members are doing. You do not have to be a professional speaker or credentialed or pass a test or anything like that to give a mini program about what you're doing. If you built your own solar spotter out of straws and bottle caps, we think that's cool. Take some pictures of it, put together a few slides and tell us about it. It doesn't matter if it takes 2 minutes or 10 minutes. We would love to hear about what our members are doing in the astronomical community. It inspires other members to try things they didn't think about before. And it encourages, especially when just normal everyday people do normal everyday things, it really kind of opens people's eyes to how exciting or how rich this hobby and science can be for all of us. For those of you watching the YouTube, the live member streams are only available to members, but you can join via our website at cfas.org. We also have an events calendar there that gets updated with public things that are going on. You don't have to be a member. Once we come back to meeting in person at the planetarium, by the way, you don't have to be a member to come to the meetings, and you are welcome to come to any of the public events that we're doing that will also be on the club website. Our publicity chair, Sharife, is looking for astrophotos or photos of people doing astronomy at CFAS events. So if you got any of those, please send them Sharife's way. Also, our new outreach chair, Mauricio, wants to hear about things that you were doing outreach-wise. If you set your telescope up in the front yard and the nosy neighbors came over and you ended up showing them the moon and had a great time, tell Mauricio about it. He would love to log it, and it actually counts towards community hours and things that CFAS is doing for the community. So that would be great. Some things that are coming up this month, Telescope Thursdays. We are supporting the planetarium on February 17th, which is coincidentally a Thursday. That will be at the Kissimmee Lakefront Park. That's going to go from 7 to 9 o'clock. That is a public event. Come on out and look through some telescopes. If you want to bring a telescope in support of the event, please talk to Derek or Mauricio about that for no reason other than so that we can coordinate and tell you where to go. You may have some special parking, that sort of thing. I've done several Telescope Thursday events myself. They're always a lot of fun. You have no idea. You set up in the backyard and your family's like, Dad, that's boring. Maybe they don't. But some of these public events are really a lot of fun. People love looking through telescopes and talking telescopes. And so if you are, well, I'll just stop there. It's a lot. It really is a lot of fun to do. We're also going to have a public event at Geneva, or Geneva, at the Geneva Gun Range. That's a state college property. Reasonably, it's darker than your yard, most likely. If you live anywhere around Orlando, it's not super dark, but it is darker than your yard. You can see the Milky Way. We've gotten treated to some great meteor showers there. You can see some dark sky objects and even do some astrophotography. That's going to be March the 5th from 7 to 11 at the Geneva Gun Range. Members and non-members are invited to show up. If you don't have a telescope, show up anyway, wander around and look through everybody else's telescope. Or if you're looking to see what kind of telescope you should get, this is another great opportunity to see the different kinds of telescopes and look through them and talk to people who own them as to what they have. We as CFAS only, we're going to have an informal star party. Now, if you're an old timer in CFAS, you know that we used to do Astrofest every year. We may get back to that in time, but right now things are just too tentative to try to plan a big party with speakers and all that sort of thing. So we're going to kind of get together in Chiefland. That will be March the 31st through April 3rd. That's a Sunday. That's Thursday through Sunday. It is near new moon. And again, this is an informal, hey, what if a whole bunch of CFAS people just showed up and took over the place? And that's what we're going to do. Chiefland, if you don't know about it, it's up in Chiefland, Florida. Google it, bring it up on Google Maps. It's up kind of in the little armpit of Florida. And it's pretty dark there. Not the darkest place you've ever been, but the Milky Way is quite brilliant. It's a great place for astrophotography. There used to be a very large major star party held there every year, but the organization that did that fell apart. But it's still a great place. The houses in the Chiefland Astronomy Village, they all have observatories, and it's a nice community of amateurs. And there's a guy there with a big field called the Billy Dodd Memorial Field. For $25 a year, you can join the Chiefland Observatory Group, and you do have to be a member of Chiefland to go. It's $9 a night if you want to camp on the field. If you have an RV, it's $15 a night. They do have some 30 amp hookups for RVs. They are first come, first served. You cannot make a reservation. And if you show up and they're all full, it's first come, first serve, and we have no control over that. So be prepared to, don't count on it necessarily. Be prepared to not necessarily have that kind of a hookup. They do, however, have power. Power is generally available, like if you need to hook up your CPAP machine, or if you need power for your telescope, there's generally that kind of power is available on the field. For most people, just, don't plan on, I would not count on hooking up an RV's air conditioner or heater and big screen TV and microwave and all that sort of thing, all the comforts of home. You are camping after all, or glamping, so to speak. Now, after the meeting, I will post on the Groups IO mailing list an email with 2 attachments. One is a waiver, for insurance reasons. They're their own thing. CFAS has its liability insurance, but if we're up there on their property, they get their own thing. And the waiver just says, look, you're wandering around in the dark and you need to be careful. And if you're not careful and you get hurt, it's on you. So it's just, I am an adult and will be careful and watch after my kids, sort of thing. There's also some information on how to join. You'll have to send a $25 check. Many of our members are already Chiefland members, but if you want to go up there, by the way, you can go up there anytime. They're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even on holidays. If you are a member of the Chiefland Observing Group, it's a nice bargain for $25 because it's only, depends on where you live. It's about a 2-hour drive for me. But it's a nice dark place to go if you don't already have a spot somewhere else. It's certainly the best dark skies, within, an hour of Orlando for sure. And I will send that out after the meeting. Okay, and that actually wraps up our introductory stuff. I think it's showtime. So we'll get to our mini programs. The first two are actually me, so I'm going to blather on for a little bit longer, and then you'll be done with me. First is astrophotos sent in by our members. If you didn't get the memo, please send in every month. Send in your latest astrophotography work. Send in your latest sketches. We have sketches and astrophotos most months. We have one or two very active sketchers in the group. And Derek tends to arrange these sort of geographically from the Earth out. I just lump them together so that each person can talk about their pictures. So first, we're going to have some photos from Bill Castro. If Bill, you're on here, they can promote you. Why don't you tell us about this? And I've got two more slides with your name attached. Or I may have taken Bill by surprise. Unless Bill interrupts me. This is the sun. These were taken with an iPhone held up to, this was his astrophysics stowaway, 92 millimeter refractor, which is a very small refractor with a filter. This solar filter, I'm quite sure he would tell you this is the type of filter that goes on over the front of the telescope. Most of the time, these images are white and false colored. There are some glass ones, though, that make an orange sun. So that may be what he has. And Bill, are you around?
Yeah,
I see Bill's. I still see Bill's. All right, Bill, I'm going to be quiet and let you talk then now that you're here.
Yeah, when I got promoted, I didn't hear what you were saying, but I pretty much put everything up there that you can read. Again, just my cell phone, and held it up to the eyepiece and took about 5 pictures. Got one that was good, and that's the raw picture that comes out of the phone right there. I did crop a little bit off the top and bottom, but you run some processing on it. My friend in Ohio is a big astro-imager. And in fact, he kids me about my sketching and says I'd make a great 17th century astronomer. But that's, just going through PixInsight, he got back to me in 5 minutes with that.
Nice.
Right. And it came out really nice and sharp. And that's with the Thousand Oaks solar light filter. It gives it that orange.
Okay. That's the glass one. Okay.
It's not the glass one. It's
not the glass one, but it's orange. Okay.
It's orange, yeah. And it's a little sturdier than the Bader, which comes out all white.
Yeah.
But I've taken some cell phone and just regular little camera pictures through the Bader, and visually I think the Bader's a little bit sharper detail on it.
I use the I use the Bader myself frequently. So yeah. In fact, on this day I was looking at this sunspot visually, and that was an amazing little sunspot group right there that you captured. Yeah. Cool. And I'm just going to reemphasize, these filters go over the front of the telescope. You do not want to concentrate all this light on a little green piece of glass in the back. Somebody had a question?
Hey, yeah, I had a quick question for Bill here. So you said that this was processed with PixInsight. When you say processed, do you mean that there was stacking involved, or was it upscale? Because that sunspot looks really crisp and sharp compared to the picture on the left.
I just sent them one image, no stacking involved at all.
I wonder if that's like some AI upscaling or something, but it looks really great.
He didn't spend a lot of time on it. I mean, he replied, like 5 or 10 minutes later with that picture.
Wow. You have to look into that.
If I had to guess, I'd say he probably did a little noise and maybe some deconvolution to sharpen it up. Everybody has their favorite tool, so.
Yeah, the key thing here is, it's amazing what you can do with a simple cell phone and
it is
much processing.
you've sent in quite a few cell phone images, and they're all quite good. Um, Speaking of cell phone images, why don't you tell us about this one?
Sure. Here's that's M35. I used my 11-inch Schmidt Cassegrain and the 17 millimeter Nagler for that one. And, you know, this is in my, you know, Bortle 8, or I call it Bortle 8000 sky in Oviedo. And it's still, it's, you know, what you see through the eyepiece is what you get on a modern cell phone. And hopefully I don't ruin M35 for everybody, but with that scope or with my 130 millimeter scope or whatever, and you know, some moderately light polluted skies, I can see a star chain of the silhouette of the space shuttle there. You know, if you use a little bit of imagination, I don't have the mouse, but you know, you see the hump in the middle, and then the wings on the left and right. It's kind of flying up.
I could see that now.
Yeah, and it just,
or maybe a ghost with his arms out and a little tail. Yeah, I think these open clusters are some of the best things to show people at an outreach event, because you just ask them, "What do you see there?" It's kind of like a Rorschach test. They'll give you all kinds of things that they see. So as our most accomplished sketcher, you did turn in some sketches too, or a sketch.
Yeah, I've been getting into, you know, with, well, I've been going nuts with buying refractors lately, but into multiple stars, especially going into high power on star clusters. And you start to notice things you haven't noticed over the past 20 or 30 years of observing. And this one I Googled on this star cluster. It's the NGC 2169. It's often called the 37 cluster. And the above image, it's with the diagonal, it's a backwards 37. But at any rate, it looks pretty good. And that's at moderate power, low power. And then you go up to like 284 power, and you start to see a lot more stars. And going to higher power, especially, you know, in the suburbs, helps a lot to see fainter stars. And I just Googling it, I went to a Cloudy Nights forum, and I learned about trapezium systems. I always heard about trapezium. I think about M42, but really there's a lot of these systems, and you can see, and I typed it up in quotes from that Cloudy Nights forum from S. Smith, and that's the link to it there if you want to get to it. They're just relatively young associations, and named after the trapezium system there. But I got them labeled there. That's STF 848, and then above that, you know, in the enlarged picture, higher magnification on the bottom was 844. And I also listed their magnitudes on the right on the bottom. And what's interesting, you know, clusters still look good even though you've got a full moon going on in my Bortle 8000 sky. You can still see it.
Yeah. Very good. All right, thank you, Bill, for sending those in this month. Ashton, I don't know if I'm going to mangle his last name or not. But Ashton, you know who you are. Are you around?
Hello. Can you
hear
hear
Ashton.
Me?
Yes,
Can you
I
hear
hear
me?
you great. Yeah,
Awesome.
tell us about this photo. I like this
okay.
one.
Yeah, so this was just taken from my backyard. I live out near Paisley. I'm kind of out in the middle of nowhere, so I've got relatively dark skies just in my backyard, which is nice. This was taken by, I want to say seven or eight 5-minute exposures that were stacked on top of each other with just minor processing outside of that, just to get the temperature a little better, just because I took them very cold. But yeah, this is actually my first attempt at star trails like this, and I think it came out pretty good.
Indeed, I believe it did. What software did you use to combine them?
Just like to stack them, I used Star Stacks.
Star Stacks. I've heard of that. Okay, very good, very good. Here's another one that you sent in.
Oh
What is
yeah.
this fuzzy thing?
Yeah, so this was
I know
taken
what it is.
actually right about at the same angle as the other one. And I was honestly just surprised that I was able to get really anything from Andromeda right there. And I just thought that that was interesting that I was able to see that just from out here because I've got from right where this is facing, I've got DeLand, the light pollution from
Mhm.
DeLand right next to it. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting that I was able to see that from here.
What kind of camera did you use?
This was taken on my Rebel T7.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was yeah, I was at 200 millimeters zoomed in here.
So you had a regular camera lens. You didn't have a big telescope and the tracking
No.
mount and all that sort of thing. You just had a camera lens on a tripod and you captured
Yep.
the Andromeda galaxy. I think that's fantastic. And so can you if you are watching right now, live or via YouTube. All right. Thank you very much, Ashton, for sending those in. Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Great work. Okay, so next I have a couple from me. I am not last though. This is the Horsehead and Flame Nebula region. Um, this was the weekend before last. In lieu of the Winter Star Party, I ended up at my place down in Okeechobee County. We have very good weather. We have very good dark skies down there, and the weather was fantastic. This is only a little over 2 hours of exposure on a 92 millimeter refractor with a reducer. So it was optically, it was f5, 5.3, and it's only about 2 hours worth of data on a cooled color camera. I was pretty happy with the red dust down here. So this is glowing gas, this red stuff up in here, and this down here is actually reddish dust glowing. I do have a kind of a plate solved version of this from Astroband to show you the some of the objects that are also in the frame. I love some of these little blue reflection nebula that are in the area as well. And then this is the Flame Nebula. Fun piece of trivia. The April issue of Sky and Telescope has an article by me on stacking. And at the last minute, the editor swapped images, but he didn't change the text. And so it's a picture of the Horsehead and this little reflection nebula here. But the text refers to the Flame Nebula here. So in Sky and Telescope, there's a picture for me where I talk about this being the Flame Nebula, and it was an editorial mistake. There'll be an errata in the next issue, I'm sure, but it's like, I do know the difference between the Flame Nebula and this guy here, but that's neither here nor there. Another photo from weekend before last, in honor of the Winter Star Party. I got this photo of Omega Centauri. Omega Centauri is the best place to shoot this is in the southern hemisphere, but if you're at a southern latitude like we are, it does just peak a little bit above the horizon. I shoot this and look at this every year at the Winter Star Party in the Keys because it's a really fantastic globular cluster. From where I was, it was 13.5 degrees above the horizon, which is insane. I would never tell anyone to shoot any object only 13 degrees above the horizon. And I would love to take credit for this and say, well, this is 20 years of experience and $50,000 worth of equipment, blah, blah, blah. It was just really good weather. And actually it's a good object lesson for astrophotographers. A lot of times we fight with our gear and can't blame the camera, blame the scope, blame whatever. And a lot of times it's just the weather is not good for astrophotography. And this is one of those times where the weather was unusually good versus unusually bad. And it was just extremely stable seeing all the way down to the horizon. Had I been in the Keys with that weather, I might have even gotten Eta Carina, which is even lower than this. But that's a globular cluster, or kind of a mini galaxy of its own, right outside the Milky Way. Our next, and I think last set of images is from John Starr, who turned in some great solar and a deep sky image. John, if you're around, I have some notes so I can fill in if he's not, but
Sure.
if I hear voices.
Hey, yeah,
Go ahead.
thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
good evening.
Go ahead,
So,
John.
So yeah, so this one I took a couple days ago. I was pretty excited because I had just gotten this a Skywatcher EvoStar 72 ED, which is a nifty little scope, and so I set it up. So it was the first light for that scope, and so I only had a few minutes because it was sort of on my lunch break at work, but I spent a little time, I don't know, 15 minutes or so, taking some videos here, doing a little lucky imaging. So I used the Daystar Quark, the chromosphere model, and a focal reducer, and the ZW ASI 290. So my guide camera actually on a Skywatcher EQ6R Pro, and I used the Fire Capture as the capture software here, auto stacker to stack it, and then I used a program, PPG. Richard, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I read Richard's article when I was doing research on how to shoot the sun, and came across that article. It was a great little program, and so use that. So full disclosure, this is an inverted image. So this is, I think it's called false inversion there. So you see a little bit better the texture and stuff and contrast of the surface of the sun here. And then Photoshop just to provide some false color and sharpen it up a little bit.
Wow. You had me at, wow, I just took this over my lunch break. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's.
Well, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
lucky imaging, right? It's just that, right? It was a
Yeah.
nice day, it was clear and all that.
Yeah. It takes me 15 minutes to get everything out of the car, much less set it up. All right. We have another photo though from you.
Sure,
why don't
yeah.
you tell us about this one?
So Andromeda, right? So this one, I went camping in January, and so this was taken from my campsite in the Ocala National Forest, and it was a very clear night, very cool and crisp, and so I spent a little over 3 hours shooting this, and so it was nice Bortle 4, nice dark skies, and so this was shot with a Red Cat 51, a Canon EOS RA. No filters or anything like that. 181 minute exposures on a Skywatcher Star Adventure star tracker. And then I used Deep Sky Stacker to stack this, and then Photoshop to sort of process it. So I'm pretty pleased with sort of how it came out. I hadn't shot anything that was, you know, using 1 minute exposures before. I tried going longer, but I was getting trails and everything else, and so I must not have had the polar alignment just right, but it worked out with the 1 minute shot. So
1 minute is enough. My Omega Centauri was 1 minute exposures. I didn't mention that, but yeah, see my article in April Sky and Telescope about stacking. It is magic. You can take lots and lots of short exposures, and it really can equal very few long exposures, depending on your noise characteristics and such. But yeah, great job. 181 minutes. That's a really nice photo. And on a Star Adventure, I have one of those. That's not a big sophisticated mount either. That's something that you can put in a suitcase and take with you on an airplane. So that's really great work. Thanks, John.
Yep.
All right. That is the last of our astro photos. Let me, next up in the program is me again, a minute on the moon. And I mean it, a minute is all I ever talk about the moon. I'm going to talk about, though, a Dial-A-Moon, which is not a lunar feature this month. Dial-A-Moon is my favorite web resource for mapping the moon. Just Google Dial-A-Moon 2022, and you will find the NASA Scientific Visualization Studio website, and they have a Dial-A-Moon interface. You can put in the date, the time, and the hour. They have the moon pre-rendered every hour of the day all year long. And if you click on the image, you can get a high resolution view of the moon with highlighted craters along the terminator or along the edge of the moon, wherever it is. They do a very good job of simulating the moon. It's not just shading from the craters, but it's also they simulate the shadows that the sunlight casts. The visualization guy, Ernie Wright, who shares my last name, is my hero. I think this is one of the best lunar visualizations that I've ever seen. There's also some animations that you can download and play showing lunar librations. and the progress of as the moon goes through its phases with different things highlighted. And there's also source data with maps and data for visualization scientists or visualization scientist amateurs or artists who are doing 3D things with their 3D software. You can make little miniature visualized moons yourself. It's very easy to find. Just Google dial a moon, and actually dial a moon will probably find it, but they update it every year. So dial a moon 2022 will get you that for this year. There are several years back. So if you just want to know exactly how the moon looked, on some date a couple of years back, do dial a moon 2020 or dial a moon 2019, etc., whatever you're interested in. And that is a minute on the moon. I am done as promised. Next up, Mauricio is going to talk about a trip he took recently to one of my favorite places to go. I'm going to stop sharing my screen though. And Mauricio, I'm going to let you take over.
All right, thank you. So as Richard said, I'm going to share with you guys my experience with Dry Tortugas National Park. Let me just go ahead and start sharing my screen here. All right, close this. Sorry, I'm still getting used to this. All right. So before I dive into sharing pictures and things like that, I just wanted to talk about Dry Tortugas itself and a little bit of its history. So Dry Tortugas National Park is a group of 7 islands that lies 70 miles west of Key West. The park is 73 square miles in size, and 99% of that is actually underwater. So if I zoom in here, you can see this small area. This is where the famous Fort Jefferson is located. And that's where you would spend most of your time if you visited Dry Tortugas on a typical trip like I did. To truly appreciate the park, as you can see here, you would need to either get on your own boat and go out there or bring a kayak with you when you visit the park. And you can see that there's quite a lot of features around the area to explore. All of these little markers, these little circle markers, and this little marker right here, those indicate shipwrecks, and they're kind of all over the place. You can see they mark for you where the good scuba diving is, where the good snorkeling is. And so I really only scratched the surface of what you can do in the park. And so if anybody out there is like really hardcore into kayaking, or possibly has the kind of boat that could actually go out there, you might actually be able to enjoy the park in a fuller capacity. Okay, so the national park marks the border of a barrier reef that extends from Dry Tortugas all the way down to Miami, and so that makes it an important sort of area to enter and exit the Gulf. So the park was a very important place, or the islands was an important place during the colonial era, because it marked a safe place that ships could come in, enter the Gulf, leave the Gulf, and also importantly, they were able to come rest on the island. So if you see here, this is a photo I pulled from the web. You can see that the island has these sort of deeper channels that come in here. These serve as excellent bays to come and bring in your boat and not hit a reef and capsize and everything, which was a huge danger for any sailors exploring the Caribbean. There's just tons of shipwrecks everywhere because of all the reefs that they would hit. Okay, so now the islands became important to the United States after the 1803 Louisiana Purchase, because that's when we gained access to the Mississippi River, right? And that became an important point of trade. And so in 1846, the US government began construction of Fort Jefferson to secure this area for trade purposes and to secure the booming American economy that is beginning to start up around this time. So that's why they went through this huge effort to build such a giant fort all the way out in the ocean. And another thing I should point out is, in 1814, the White House was burned down by the British. So that was kind of a rude awakening for young America, and another reason to begin fortifying these sort of areas. So that was related to the effort. Okay, so it becomes a military fort, but during the Civil War, the government converts the island into a military prison to house Union deserters, as well as 4 men who aided John Wilkes Booth in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. So that's when the history of the fort takes a dark turn. And it's just exactly what you would expect to hear from a gloomy military prison, fort out in the middle of the ocean. It's just not a happy place at all. In 1874, the Army abandons the fort, and in 1908, it becomes a refuge to protect the sooty tern, which is a bird that nests on the island. And so that marked the beginning of its sort of conversion to a natural preserve. And then in 1992, the park becomes Dry Tortugas National Park, and then the rest is, left for us to enjoy. So moving on from a little history lesson there, this is the Yankee Freedom boat service that takes people out to the island. It's about a 2.5-hour boat ride. And it can be a little pricey if you're camping. The tickets costed just over $200 per person. And then it was $15 a night to camp. So the camping itself was quite cheap, but the logistics of getting to the Keys, booking a hotel the night before, getting, so that you can be there at 6 a.m. to get on the boat, plus the cost of the boat, plus the cost of parking. So it can actually be a little bit of an expensive trip, considering that you're just camping. But hey, that's the logistics of getting out to an island. So here's a picture of some people chilling out on the back deck on the boat. This is actually on our return trip. And this is what the inside of the upper cabin looks like. It can actually be a fairly comfortable experience. The boat service, the Yankee Freedom, they do everything they can to make sure that people are comfortable. They give you a pretty significant warning against motion sickness. Actually, I went and bought a few chewable tablets myself. And I'm glad I did, because the day that we went out, it was incredibly windy, and we hit some pretty rough waves on the way out, and that was with the wind. The people returning that day were going to go against the wind. And when I asked a crew member about how that return trip was that day, he actually laughed, because apparently it was very rough. And we actually had calm winds, a calm day on the trip back. And I actually thought we had some pretty heavy movement there. So I can only imagine what it's like on a day when you're, riding against the wind on a super windy day. Definitely do everything you can to control that motion sickness. So another way to get to the island is by seaplane, and we actually had the opportunity to have one land kind of close to us when we were snorkeling. So I caught this little picture. I don't have much to say about the seaplane service. I didn't look it up. I don't know how expensive it is. I hate flying, and flying in a tiny little plane with a lot of turbulence would have been pretty terrible for me. So I didn't even quite look that up. So if you're interested in that, by all means, I'm sure it's an excellent way to get there much quicker, and the views of the island, I'm sure, are beautiful on the way in. Okay, so moving on to some pictures that I took. So this is one of the walls of Fort Jefferson. This is the north beach, and you can see the moat wall here. The moat wall, in my opinion, is the most interesting feature of the fort. It lets you walk around the back half of the fort, and you get some really fantastic views of the waters around it. This is generally the area that they encourage people to do their snorkeling. And so it's a good idea to walk around the moat, kind of check out the waters, make sure you feel comfortable with it, see if they're cloudy. My only real complaint about the trip was that it was actually the snorkeling conditions were a little bit cloudy, despite the beautiful weather, despite the color of the water here, which would indicate incredible snorkeling. It actually was pretty cloudy on our first day. Here's a picture I took of Loggerhead Key, which has this lighthouse that they built to help people, navigate around the reefs and sort of mark the point at which, hey, it's safe here to, you know, go around and exit the Gulf of Mexico and head back to Europe, or wherever it is that the Gulf Stream is going to take you. This is about 3 miles out, is my understanding, from the fort, and you can actually kayak from Dry Tortugas out over here to Loggerhead. But I definitely wouldn't have recommended it on the day I was there, because it was extremely windy, and I definitely probably would have run into trouble being an unexperienced kayaker. So, all right, so these are just some shots of the fort. Really great opportunity for any people who like to take photos of repetitive architecture. The fort itself, my understanding is that, if you hear my cat in the background, I'm sorry about that. He's being a punk. But the fort itself is the largest coastal fort that the United States built, and it is quite large. It actually it looks larger on the inside than it does from the outside here. So here's just a few photos from the inside. I really enjoyed the patterns created by the arches and the brick rooms and everything. Pretty gloomy place. The stories that you go around, and there's plaques telling stories about the prisoners, about life in the port. It seemed like a pretty horrible place to be, regardless if you were a prisoner or a soldier during the prison era. And there was a particular prisoner called Dr. Mudd, who had helped fix the leg of John Wilkes Booth. And so he got sent to this prison, and he was actually pardoned for helping so many prisoners during the, I think it was a Spanish fever epidemic, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, so feel free to correct me on that. But so he was actually pardoned after 4 years. And this was actually, this photo is taken inside of his, it was directly outside of his chamber. So the next room over would have been his cell. The fort itself, in the middle of the fort, is this massive courtyard. And this is where really you get a sense for how large the place is. It really didn't seem like that huge of a fort when I walked up to it, and you walk inside this courtyard, you really get a feel for it. I didn't take too many pictures inside the courtyard, but I really did enjoy these beautiful trees. It's a very nice place to sit on a bench and just kind of take in the afternoon. They give tour guides inside here shortly after leaving the boat. So if you're coming in for a day trip, this is probably one of the first things that you would do, is you do the tour guide. They do a 20-minute talk. You can stay for a longer tour if you want, or you can go and start snorkeling or walking around the island, or whatever it is that you wanted to do. I really want to emphasize just how beautiful the waters are. I cannot believe how vibrant the colors. I did my best to accurately depict just how vibrant these blues are. Very deceptive, because looking at these waters, you would think, wow, like these are incredible tropical waters. The snorkeling must be amazing, but because of the windy conditions, the waters are just too churned up. And so the first few days was pretty lousy snorkeling. Okay, so this is a picture of a magnificent frigate bird. And so these birds were all above our heads during the entire trip. It looks like the bird is flying by, but it's actually stationary. They just catch the windy currents and pretty much just hover above the island. The frigate bird is the island hosts a nesting colony for the frigate bird. It's the only major colony in the US for these birds, and there's about 100 nests on the colony. Here's another picture of them. Again, not really flying, they're really just soaring in the air, staying mostly stationary. You can actually appreciate how windy the day is by looking at the sea. It's quite turbulent, and there's Yankee Freedom sailing back to Key West, and I'm sure they had a terrible bumpy trip back. So this next bird here, I pulled this from the internet. I didn't take this photo, but this is the sooty tern, which I mentioned before. This is actually the reason that, or one of the reasons that the park became a natural refuge back in the early 1900s to protect these birds. 80,000 of these birds nest annually on the island. And it's, again, also the only major colony in the United States. Here's just to give you an idea of one of the islands is called Bush Key. It's directly next to Garden Key, which is where Fort Jefferson is. And if you're a fan of walks on the beach, it's a very nice island to just take a nice long walk on. I do recommend bringing a hat. There's almost no trees on these islands except for the ones inside the fort and the ones directly next to the camping areas. It's very exposed. So I had a hat on the entire time. Very beautiful, kind of flowery meadows on the sand dunes of Bush Key. So that was very, very nice. And watching the birds fly with those. So this is the kind of the tip of Bush Key here, and you can see that there's a very shallow channel of water right here, which actually connects Bush Key and what's called Long Key, which is where the sooty terns make their nest. And if I zoom in here, you can actually see all the birds going crazy over there. It's very loud, and so that's where they do their nesting. You are not allowed to walk over there, but my girlfriend did actually walk through this channel, and she made it over here to this little island right here. I tried following, but my feet were killing me because it's actually very rocky. And when I say rocky, I actually mean corally, because this is actually all just dead coral. It was incredible how much coral was built up on these beaches. I've never seen anything like it. I'm quite convinced that most of the sand must be made of disintegrated coral because it was just everywhere. All right, so moving on to the beautiful sunsets. Obviously, anywhere in the Keys is a great place to view sunrises and sunsets, but Dry Tortugas was definitely one of the best places that I've seen one. So we had fantastic weather, fortunately, on all of our days there. So we had clear horizons, clear skies. I was able to capture what I'm fairly certain is some sunspots here. I'm hoping they're not blemishes on my camera. I'm pretty sure they're sunspots, but it was a very, very enjoyable sunset. And it really is just surreal seeing the sun as a perfect sphere. It really gives you an appreciation for the fact that it's a place, it's an object there on the horizon and not just a super bright thing in the sky. So I always love seeing this type of sunset experience because it just kind of gives you that context that you need sometimes. All right, so we had a beautiful first night. This is taken from the moat wall on the southern side of the beach. This is looking south, and you can see Orion up here in the sky. And I wanted to kind of capture this, this feeling of like a path walking off into space. It didn't quite work out. There's actually a guy with a, oh, I forgot to talk about the people on the island, the National Park Service, and there's a construction crew out there. They all live on the island, and they actually have modified apartments in these, I guess what used to be cells, and they actually look out over the water. It's kind of interesting. It sounds like kind of an interesting, cool experience if you can sort of deal with being out on an island for, you know, most of the year. It's probably not for anywhere, but there's this one guy that had a window open and a light on, and it was actually pretty bright, and it casted this, you know, this light over here. So that's not quite what I was going for, but it did make for an interesting picture. So this is on literally in the same spot, but looking north. And I did get a little bit more of the effect that I wanted of a pathway just going off into the darkness with the cosmos. What I really wanted was for the Milky Way to be kind of vertical right here where the pathway appears, but it didn't quite work out. But it was still a lot of fun taking these photos, and a little nerve-wracking because it's dark and you have water on each side, so it's being very careful not to fall and slip. And you really do have to be careful in the park because there's a lot of hazards. It's not in any way designed to be friendly. There's no guardrails anywhere. There's debris all over the place, so you really need to wear shoes everywhere you go. Apparently, most of the injuries in the park are caused by foot injuries. So, all right. So here's our tent and our camping ground. Each camping ground gets a table along with a grill, and so here we are under the stars. I always try and take a photo like this when I camp under the stars. At any time, I believe there's up to 10 campers allowed per night, so it can be actually quite difficult to find a camping spot. I had to reserve this trip back in, I think it was August or September, and I actually snagged like one of the last slots for February. So I was pretty shocked that it fills up that quickly. Here's one last shot of the night sky. This is looking south over the water. This light that you see at the bottom is actually one of several boats that come out and anchored out in the bay. And they were there the entire time. They were there for days, and apparently people just come out, set anchor, and just chill out. And they use little motorboats to ferry themselves onto the island, because I guess they can't actually use their own boats to come ashore. So they'll visit the island periodically, and I'm assuming that they'll actually use the Yankee Freedom services as well, because Yankee Freedom actually offers working restrooms from 10:30 to like about 2:30 p.m. each day. They serve lunch, they serve drinks, so it's actually very cool. All the things that Yankee Freedom does for people visiting the island, they really make sure that you have as many amenities as possible. All right, so this is what the sunrises look on the island. You can see very a lot of debris, right? Like, I thought it was a very cool sort of imagery here. I caught a very nice sunrise from the moat, and I actually didn't even notice it was misty like this until after I had looked at the photos, and I thought that turned out pretty cool. All right, so one last thing. So this here is these trees here mark the camping area, and this is on the South Beach, which in my opinion was the nicest part of the island. Sitting under these trees and lying under their shade during the day was wonderful, very relaxing. And I think that if it wasn't for just this little grouping of trees, this trip can actually turn quite miserable, because the sun is just insane out there, and it's awesome having just a nice little like beach paradise here to sit down and relax in the shade. It's very awesome. All right, so moving on to the snorkeling. On our last day, we finally had some calm winds. It was a nice, just calm day, and the water's cleared up just enough that you could get in the water and you could actually see, more than 10 feet in each direction. So we started snorkeling. There's an area called called the Coaling Dock Ruins, and they're these. It was an old dock that the ships used to use to refuel, which got both of them. There was a south Coaling Dock and North Coaling Dock. They both got destroyed by hurricanes, which is great for us because now they're these awesome snorkeling areas. So you can just imagine if they're this interesting on a cloudy day, imagine what it's like when the waters are pristine and clear during the summertime. Apparently there's a season to go snorkel there. So I definitely want to go back in the summer when the winds are calmer, the waters are clearer, and we can have a better experience. So I didn't get to see too much in the wildlife section. We did see a big old barracuda, kind of like a medium size. We saw plenty of fish, but it was just too cloudy to really fully appreciate everything. There are sharks in these waters. I asked the rangers what kind of species are present, and he said that they see bull sharks, lemon sharks, hammerheads. They see mirror sharks, of course. And apparently 2 weeks before the trip or before we arrived on the trip, a lady had actually gotten bitten by a shark, and she had to be carried away in a seaplane that was docked there, fortunately. So I'm assuming she's okay. I'm not quite sure how that story ended, but it definitely kept me on guard when swimming around, because during the first 2 days, you really could not see 5 feet, 5, 6 feet, to your left or right. So very impressive coral formation, just completely covered this, whatever this this part of, I guess, an old ship or an old structure was. Here's the same structure facing the sun. Really just, some of the best structures of coral that I've ever seen. Of course, my experiences are still kind of limited. And this is actually a shot not by the coaling docks, but this is actually by the moat wall, which I'm assuming is really wonderful when the waters are clear, because a lot of coral grows off the wall, and it's just a very cool and it gives you like a relative, if you're a beginner snorkel, a relative safe point of reference to kind of swim along, to just feel more comfortable than swimming in open waters. One last photo of just some coral growing out of this wall. And that pretty much wraps up my picture. So let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen here and see if anybody has some questions. Okay.
There was a question. Jan Nelson would like to know, how dark is it there compared to, say, KPP or Chiefland?
All right. Well, that's a great question. So I haven't been to Chiefland, but I have been to Kissimmee Prairie Preserve, and I can definitely say it's much darker than Kissimmee Prairie, because you gotta imagine, like, you're literally out in the middle of the ocean, whereas in Kissimmee Prairie, yeah, it's dark. It's Florida's designated dark sky spot, but you've got plenty, cities within an hour and a half of there, so you have lots of light domes. I actually was teensy bit disappointed in Kissimmee Prairie's level of darkness compared to, there's actually places in North Florida that are darker, like St. Joseph. I think it's called like St. Joseph Preserve or something, is the place where I stayed at, and that was very dark. But I think Dry Tortugas might be the darkest place that I went to. I do want to point out that you're quite limited in what you can bring to the boat. You have to put everything in hard containers, because the island has a rat problem, so they don't want anyone bringing food or anything in these sort of soft containers, right? And so I didn't bring a telescope. I only brought binoculars and a tripod in my camera gear, because I really wouldn't have had room for anything else if I had brought even my smallest telescope. So actually, Richard, I wanted to ask, do you image at Dry Tortugas?
Yeah, I've gone twice, and the first time I just did camera on a tripod stuff. The second time I went, I actually did take a mount and a telescope. It was a Paramount, actually. And I pulled a trick, which was, I had a family party of 6, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was like everybody could take 65 pounds. And I said, okay, we're all going to the Tortugas and I'm paying, and you can all bring 40 pounds. And so I basically I stole a little bit of weight from everybody in order
Nice.
to and I put a 20-pound counterweight in my backpack, and about halfway there on you decided that was a mistake. That that I swear it weighed 100 pounds by the time we got there. And that's with, sitting down on the ferry, and, and not having to carry it around very much. But
Wow.
yeah, I was pretty clever about it, I guess, in that if you get enough people going and you budget, and you can get it. One person can get away with bringing a lot of stuff. I I called. I'm actually going back again in December, and when I talked to them, they said they were full through. They were booked solid through September of this year. So my family and I are going again in December, but I'm going to bring a small something that will fit in a Pelican case and maybe a small refractor, probably on a Sky Tractor sort of thing. I'm not going to try to bring a Paramount. It was a Mighty, which is the smallest Paramount, but it's a 45-pound mount and a big telescope, and it scared them. They were like, "What is this?"
I'm
And
sure that scared them.
it's
Yeah.
a gun. It's a gun. No, open it up.
Oh
Okay,
man,
it's a telescope. Well, that's cool. So
that's funny.
yeah, it was fun.
My thoughts on the matter to anyone interested in going is that, if you can fit, definitely bring binoculars. Do not go without
Yeah.
binoculars.
Oh yeah.
If you can
Yeah.
fit a small scope somehow, then do it. But I think that if you're going to dry Tortugas to image, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because I mean, there are slightly less dark places in Florida you can go, but still get great imaging for much easier and much cheaper, right? So like I think
Yeah.
your time on dry Tortugas is better spent going carrying light and just really enjoying the park,
Yeah.
swimming, kayaking, whatever.
Yeah.
You do have to
I've
bring your
done
own
it.
kayak though.
Yeah, I've done it both ways, and you're right. I was sort of doing a publicity stunt the second time
Mm.
because I wrote an article about it. It was like, look, with a small computer and a power source, you can do it, but you're only there for a couple of days. You can't do deep sky imaging justice in a couple of days and get the weather right. But wide
Right.
field, definitely bring some binoculars, bring a small telescope to do some visual. The skies are primordially dark. I mean,
They're really quite beautiful.
I've been to Chiefland and I've been to KPP and I've been to star parties around the country. The next closest dark sky, I think, is the Grand Canyon National Park, and it's very close. Because of the altitude, I think it's more transparent. But I've never
Yeah.
been anywhere as dark as the Dry Tortugas. It's 90 miles off of Key West. Somebody was asking where the Yankee Freedom comes from. It's Key West. But Key West is not Miami. So 90 miles from Key West, there's not a light dome intruding on you down there.
Yeah. So Yankee Freedom leaves from Key West. And I want to re-establish the logistics, right? Because to do this trip, you got to be on that ferry by 6 a.m. So you're staying in Key West the night before, right? You're either staying in Key West or in one of the closer keys. So,
Right.
and unfortunately, that's very expensive, right? Like it's impossible to get a decent stay for less than 300 nights in like the Keys, unless you book like months and months in advance. So, the logistics of it can be a little complicated. You could always do a day trip over if you happen to be in the Keys and you program it right. But of course, you'll miss out on the wonderful sky. So, it's almost not worth it for anyone in this club to do a day trip. And plus, you pay for the ferry, which is pretty expensive. So if you're going to pay for the ferry, you might as well pay almost nothing for the camping and just do it. Does anyone have any other questions before we move on from Dry Tortugas?
I know we have some other members. Derek has been a few times.
Yeah,
I know
Derek's been.
Trisha's been down there. It's a really great experience. And the people who've been there keep going back again and again. So it's not.
Yeah. There was a couple who camped next to us. It was their second time going.
Mhm.
And there was a gentleman who, I think it was another gentleman who actually does a lot of camping, does a lot of stargazing. And he said it wasn't that great of a night because I guess it was a little turbulent and hazy, but this guy has been everywhere, so he's seen like some incredible skies. He says the desert out west is actually better than Dry Tortugas because of the dry climate and the altitude and the
Yeah, the
altitude, so.
transparency. The transparency is pretty good out west. That's for sure.
All right. Well, I was happy to share, and
Thank you.
I guess we can move on now.
So all right. And back to my plea for mini programs and people to present. If you go on vacation and there's a night sky there, we want to hear about it. Share it with the rest of the club, please. Okay, so our next mini program is from Sharife on the overview effect. Sharife is our publicity chair.
Hello.
The club's equivalent to Deanna Troy, our counselor.
All
Take it
right.
away, Sharife.
Sounds good. I'm gonna, let's see here. I'm gonna share this. And, all right, so I have a quick question for you guys, which I am actually, let me actually stop sharing, put this in the chat. And this is for everybody. Go ahead and feel free to write it in the chat, or if you're watching on YouTube or whatever, just give it a thought. Why look up? So why would we want to look up in astronomy? So a little bit about that. I'll come back to that later. Go ahead and feel free to write that in the chat, but I will ask you that question. So I'm going to talk about the overview effect. A little bit about me. You guys know that I'm a publicity chair, and a lot of you know that for my day job, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. And so a lot of what I do is talking about is kind of helping people push their limits, change their perspectives, initiating change. And a way to do that is through the overview effect. So really cool way. Some of you might have heard the concept before. So why look up? I will check in with you at the end. So originally let's see, let me move this here. Originally the concept, the term was coined by philosopher and author Frank Wright. He was the author of the book, The Overview Effect. And basically what it is shifting a perspective of someone's perspective to something to see the bigger picture. And so as you can see in the picture of the book, it's an astronaut looking in on Earth. And so you guys might be familiar with this picture, and it was taken by astronaut Bill Anders from Apollo 8. And I actually have it behind me. I don't know if you can see that, but I have it behind me because it's a way that the astronauts were able to look from the moon at Earth and get a perspective shift. So they were able to look in and realize that we live on this spaceship Earth, and it's blue marble is how they described it. You might have heard that term also. And so that shift that was happening with the astronauts was something that maybe we could replicate the other way around. And so kind of going back to looking into space, into our telescopes out into space, maybe we can do that, a similar thing as the astronauts did. So what does the overview effect basically mean? So it's getting an idea of the sense of awe and wonder when we look out into space. So it's a cognitive shift. Psychologists are not really sure what that shift, the physiology of what that shift actually is. There's a lot of research going on right now with using like virtual reality and trying to simulate some of that. Some of the research involves mimicking some of the effects that astronauts would get by using music and by changing some of the brain waves that would happen to simulate this kind of thing. So what they would observe is sense of clarity, different environmental connectedness, which is a dimension of wellness. So we feel like we're part of something. When we look out into space or looking from space to Earth, you notice that there's no real boundaries. There's no borders. We're all one. And so there can be a sense of connectedness and unity. Can also evoke a lot of emotional response that's really strong. So we can wonder, like, what's out there? Are we alone? Are we fragile? Are we part of something much bigger? And so it opens up a whole can of worms as far as what it is that where our place in space is. So when we look at these kind of pictures, if you look through a telescope and we look up at pictures of astronomy in a textbook, or even, in here, whatever, they're beautiful, right? They're incredible pictures of the moon, of Pleiades, of Orion Nebula. But in order to experience the actual overview effect and make that cognitive shift actually happen, we have to experience it firsthand, which is what we do with CFAS and with outreach. And one of the reasons why, and I'll check back at the chat later, see what you guys have put, one of the reasons why we do this is to give that opportunity to other people to be able to experience that cognitive shift. So how many of you guys have, looked through the telescope and maybe looked at the moon, shown it to somebody else, maybe a kiddo or their parents or something, and then their face is just lit up and you know that they've seen something really cool? Or they're looking at Saturn, and of course you get somebody that says, oh, it's a sticker on the, you make the joke that it's a sticker at the end of the telescope, and you might even get a tear or something from somebody looking through the telescope. That is the overview effect. And so it's being able to kind of understand what else is out there, consider possibilities. It might be terrifying for some people, or it might be a sense of comfort. So point of this, and why I mention it, is because not only does this apply to some of the counseling stuff that I do with clients, but also being able to bring that to, why do we do astronomy? What is the point of it? And it might be because it's fun, it can be a technical thing, but it can also be a lot bigger. We can help find our own purpose within our place in space again. And it's kind of like taking the Planetary Society slogan. But we can help other people overcome obstacles. We can help other people maybe consider other perspectives, even our own. So it's kind of neat that we can do that. And so by coming out to outreach, not that I'm like, plugging this, whatever, but by doing that, we can actually help, other people doing that, and we can do that. So that is a basic outline of the overview effect. I'm going to stop sharing this and look, see what you guys have put. So let's see, Mauricio was saying getting some perspective, absolutely. And to see how much more there is out there, absolutely. We look through that and we can see what else is out there, looking at possibilities, looking at what our options are. Instinctual, absolutely. So it's beautiful. Yeah, it can be as simple as it's gorgeous, right? And curiosity, we want to know why. There can be, like I said, a sense of freedom, or maybe even a sense of terror for a lot of people. So yeah, Saturn is where you get a lot of wows, absolutely, and being able to kind of make that connection for people of like, oh, okay, Saturn is a real thing. Let's see, seeing how we're part of something so big, very cool. Seeing where we're maybe a small part, or how fragile we are, what our potential is. And so that's the other part of the overview effect, is connecting with, what are we actually capable of? What are we actually capable of just by connecting with that and helping other people do that? And so there's always, there are always some babies that will try and crawl out of the crib. We have to know what's out there. Absolutely. Yeah. So how would you speak to somebody who experiences existential dread when thinking of space? That's interesting. That can be a whole can of worms. And, from a counseling perspective, it's like, I would try and understand what they mean by that, and kind of what their connection is with what they mean by that. Figuring out where it might be, a sense of insignificance, and then maybe how do you transform that into something that's kind of their purpose and their driving, and it can be a motivator instead of something that is like an existential crisis. So yeah, and the Frank White book is great. So ask them what sci-fi they watch. Very cool. You could ask them, connect with them, even relating when you're doing outreach, relating, what do they enjoy, in sci-fi? And then even like I was telling somebody a couple outreaches ago about Mimas and how it's like the Death Star, and they were making jokes, pull up a picture of Mimas, and it's like, oh, that is the Death Star, how cool that is, and then making those connections. So yeah, awesome. Well, it's kind of my passion project. It was published in did a couple of different articles on the overview effect, and they were published in a couple different places. So I figured I'd give it a shot and present it to you guys and see what your thoughts are. And yeah, encourage you to keep looking up. So if there's any other thoughts, welcome them. And
Sharife, if you don't mind, I did want to share about a moment that I did experience when I was out at Dry Tortugas.
Absolutely.
The place is very beautiful, and I enjoyed it very much. But when I was kind of watching the sun go down, like that transitional moment is really, it can help you really realize that the world is quite huge. For some reason, it just tends to give the atmosphere a lot of layers, and you kind of realize, man, like that's really massive, and I'm tiny. And I definitely got a little bit of existential dread in that moment, which sometimes I go back and forth beyond, between awe and feeling like I'm a part of something versus, oh my God, like I'm tiny. This world is massive and huge.
Yeah, absolutely. From a counseling perspective of what I would do is like, okay, if that's the case, how do you use that so that you can use your purpose? You can maybe take some of these pressures of like, okay, my problems are so big, and I'm not necessarily speaking, directly about you or anything specific, but like with somebody, oh, okay, these problems are so big that I have. If we were to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, if I am that insignificant, right? Maybe some of the issues that I have going on aren't that big of a deal, you know? And so from a sense of kind of putting that into perspective, it's like, okay, maybe I can take a step back, understand, you know, where that is, and then get strength from that. So, but yeah, absolutely. That's not, it wouldn't be uncommon. So cool. Gives me new perspective on the importance of outreach efforts. Absolutely. You know, and it's a little bit more, a lot more than going out and, you know, it can be inspiring other people. And I'm sure that if you've ever done, whoever's done outreach, you have tons of stories with that. And yeah, so let's see, when working mega hours under a lot of stress, looking up at the stars helped keep me grounded. Yeah, ironically, right? And so some of the most grounded people that I've ever met are astronauts, ironically. So, and this is, I would guess, one of the reasons why. But yeah, great points. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharife.
Yeah.
Great presentation. All right. That's a topic. This is a great, like, cosmic clubhouse. We used to do those. Maybe after, you know, things calm down, we'll do it again. We would all just get together at Starbucks and sit around and talk, and that would be a great topic of conversation to have coffee or some drinks over. Just when I look up, I feel really important. When I look up, I feel really like nothing, and you know, to kind of bounce that around a little bit with everybody. Okay, so our next and second to last mini program is John Pinto is going to talk about where am I? The existential question. Where am I? You are not in Kansas. I think John is going to tell us how to find ourselves, but probably not in a philosophical way. And John, now would be a good time to interrupt me before I say something else stupid. All right.
Alrighty, so sort of an interesting follow-on to Sharife. Where am I can be an existential question. But for many people, it can be a life or death thing if you're out in the middle of the ocean and you need to know where you are. So past mini programs I've done, we've talked about how to figure out what time it is, which helps you figure out what's going to be in the sky. We also talked about where is it in the sky at that time. So, you know, how high up, how far east or west. So I figured a nice way to close out sort of the little trilogy is to answer probably the next follow-up question. So where am I, right? What time is it? Where is it? Where am I? So I decided to invite a special guest to talk about how you do that using astronomy. Apparently, this special guest I'm about to introduce was a very good friend of CFAS in the past when he was alive. Unfortunately, he passed a few years ago. But I'm going to let him explain to you how you find out where you are in the sky. So let me stop sharing this, and I'm going to share my guest speaker, which is somewhere. Here he is. Here we go.
As you can see, I'm on board ship. But where am I? This is something I can't immediately find out. And in olden days, a sailor who didn't know where he was liable to find himself in deep trouble. So he had to be a good navigator. And all navigation is based upon astronomy. Even maps are based upon astronomical principles. And the first man to do that, and to draw a world map which was based on anything more than faith and a good deal of hope, was Ptolemy of Alexandria. And he did this in the 2nd century AD. He was a pretty good astronomer come geographer, and on his map you can see quite a number of recognizable features, despite the back-to-front position of Scotland. The sailors of pre-steam days used maps, of course. They had to. But when you're out of sight of land, as we are now, and have been for some days, how do you find your way? There's an awful lot of sea, and you can't read your way by means of definite marks, because there aren't any. In fact, you can't read your position from the sea or the land. So there's only one way to do it, by using the sun and the stars. You've always got the sky. There are two things you've got to know. Your latitude, which is your distance north or south of the equator, and your longitude, which is the east to west measurement. And this is done by using an instrument called a sextant. And using our sextant at the moment, no less a person than Commander Hatfield, whom all viewers of the sky at night will know. Henry, what exactly are you doing?
I'm measuring, Patrick, the altitude of the sun at local noon. The altitude of the sun, of course, is the angle between the horizon, which is over there, and the sun, which is up there, very bright. If on this sextant you set the angle to naught, there is the angle there reading naught, you notice that that mirror and that mirror are parallel. If I increase the angle on the sextant, watch this mirror move. There, it's moving now. Now, through this telescope, I can look straight through that piece of the mirror because it's not silvered, the left-hand side. The right-hand side of that mirror is silvered. The light from the sun strikes this mirror, goes through that shade to protect my eye, and you'll notice it's in front of the telescope, hits the silvered part of that mirror, comes into the telescope. When you look through the telescope, you sit the sun on the horizon. Now, I'll sit it on the horizon now. There it is. And it is on the horizon now. And the angle of the sun above the horizon now is 54 degrees and 58.5 minutes.
Well, that gives you the height of the sun above the horizon. But how do you find your latitude from that?
Come and look, and I'll show you. This diagram represents the Earth. That's the center of the Earth. There's the North Pole. There's the South Pole. Here's the equator. This circle is actually our meridian. We are here. The angle that I've just measured is this one. It's the altitude, if you remember, of the sun, that angle between our horizon and the sun. The angle that I want is not the altitude, but this one. This angle is the zenith distance, and the zenith is the point right over my head. You'll also notice that it is the point which is the extension of the line which joins the center of the Earth and me. Center of the Earth, observer, zenith. This angle is the one that you always want when you're taking any sort of sextant observation at sea. You'll notice I've shaded it, pale grey. We'll come back to that in a minute. There is the sun from us. Here is the sun from the center of the Earth. These two lines are very, very, very nearly parallel. Not quite. The sun is not quite at infinity, but for navigational purposes, we may assume that it is at infinity. Since these two lines are parallel, that grey angle equals that grey angle. You notice they're both called zenith distance. Now let's look at the situation as viewed from the center of the Earth here. Here is our zenith distance, which we have measured. This angle is the declination of the sun. It's the angle of the sun above or below the equator. Here's the equator. There's the declination of the sun, that angle. We can look that angle up in the nautical almanac, which is really just a timetable of the sun, and in actual fact the stars too. Now, we can look this angle up. We've measured that one. What happens if we add them up? We get that angle, and if you look here, that angle is our latitude. If you add up declination and zenith distance, you get latitude straight away. And here we have the little thing to remember. Latitude equals zenith distance plus declination.
Well, this is all very well for the sun, but what about using the stars, and the pole star in particular?
Well, you can get your latitude from Polaris pretty easily. You measure the altitude of Polaris. You apply a correction which can be looked up in the nautical almanac using your own wristwatch. You apply this correction to the altitude of Polaris, and there is your latitude directly.
So, in fact, you can use Polaris at any time?
No.
When you can see it?
When you can see it and a horizon. And you can only see Polaris when it's dark-ish. You can only see the horizon when it's not too dark. And you can only see both during about 15 or 20 minutes just after sunset and 15 minutes just before sunrise.
Well, you know, many years ago, when I was an Air Force navigator, we used to use astronavigation quite a bit, and we used star shots with an artificial horizon.
Yes, you may have done, and I suspect that your errors were probably something of the order of plus or minus 10 miles.
True enough.
My sextant on a good day, will give me an error of perhaps 2 miles. It shouldn't be greater than 3.
So in this way, by using your tables and a sextant, you can get your latitude pretty accurately and very quickly.
Yes, indeed.
Well, let's assume for one moment then that you know your latitude. The next thing is longitude, and this is very much trickier because, for one thing, there's no obvious standard of reference. We measure our latitude from the equator, which is midway between the two poles, but there's no definite line for longitude. And the one that's been selected is the line on the Earth's surface running through both poles and Greenwich Observatory. And this was selected by international agreement in the days when international agreement was a great deal easier to obtain than it is now. And I think, Henry, this is where I hand back to you.
Thank you, Patrick. The problem, as ever, centers around this angle, the zenith distance. That angle doesn't have to be measured in the plane of the meridian. It can be measured in any plane. It is, of course, always measured in the line joining the observer and the sun. Supposing that we do measure that angle, and supposing that we can find out the position on the Earth where the sun is overhead at a particular time, then we can do something with that angle to find out where we are. Now, this position, it's called the subsolar point, is given in the Nautical Almanac, which is a timetable. There is the position at 1700 on the 29th of June today. The longitude of the position where the sun is overhead at 1700 is 74 degrees, 9 minutes west, and the latitude of that position, which is the declination of the sun, is 23 degrees north, 12.8 minutes west. Now, if we plot that position on this globe, you'll find that it's on the western end of the island of Cuba, just there. Supposing that that is the zenith distance, you can see that it is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 2 degrees. Put one end of the dividers on the point on the Earth, which is right under the sun. Scribe an arc over here. We are somewhere on that arc there. When we took our latitude sight, we found that we were in 23 degrees north. That is 23 degrees north. Therefore, we are
Just about where we are at the moment, in
Yes,
fact.
indeed.
But of course, Henry, all this depends upon knowing GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, and we're an awfully long way from Greenwich, and that presumably is where your really accurate timekeeper comes in.
Yes, and here he is. This is a chronometer, a very carefully made clock. The main difference between this clock and clocks which you have ashore are these gimbals. You can see it'll swing that way and that way. These gimbals, of course, are to keep it horizontal when the ship is rolling. There's not much movement on the ship now, as you can see, but if there were, that clock would remain stable.
So if you didn't know who that was, that's Sir Patrick Moore, who I've been told gave talks at CFAS many years ago. There's still some members here who remember hearing talks by Sir Patrick to CFAS members. I'm guessing it was when the club met either at the Science Museum or the observatory. I'd let some of the old time members recount some stories of that next time we get together. I put together a very, very primitive slideshow, which basically shows the information that Sir Patrick was showing us, and I'll put that up on the website. If you want to actually watch that again yourself, I'm going to show you where you can find it online. Hang on 1 second, because this way it gets on the recording. Let me share my screen again. And show this. So this is the video on Facebook Watch. If you go to this website, you'll be able to watch that again, or just go on Facebook and just search for Sir Patrick Moore Explains Navigational Astronomy, and you'll see it. And I put a couple of little slides here kind of showing the what the commander was explaining. And that's it for me. Take it away, Richard.
All right. Thanks, John. Oops. double click there once. Very nice. Very nice. Boy, Sir Patrick Moore, very young looking in that, in that video. All right. So, Mauricio, you are back on deck with outreach info, news, please, etc. Otherwise, I'm going to be
All
quiet
right.
now.
We're going till 9. Is that right? And I think this is the last portion. Is that correct?
We're going till you're done, and I say a few things, and
Okay.
yeah. So
Cool. So
take as much or as little time as you want. You don't.
all right. So I'll take a little bit more time. We'll go a little slower. So let me just pull up my logs here.
Yeah, you don't have to talk for 30 minutes.
No, I couldn't talk about this for 30 minutes if I wanted to, but I was like, I wasn't sure. All right, let me share my screen here. All right, guys, so I'm just gonna go over what we've been kind of covering in outreach here. So January was pretty interesting. We were off to a great start with the Observe the Moon night at the planetarium. I believe that was on January 15th. So this, I believe this is, I think this is Anna Jackie who came out with Eric Jackie, and they had their awesome binoculars and we're looking at the moon there. This is a shot that Leonard Ward took, and you can see just how many people came out. It was an excellent night. Definitely one of the best events we've had. We got a few, this is earlier, and we have a few people already set up and coming to check out. Looks like Eric Hoyne's giving a little demonstration there. This is a photo that I took that night with the moon up there, and you can just kind of see how many people are starting to come out. Here's a shot that Leonard Ward took. I want to say, I think with his cell phone looking through the camera. I'm not 100% sure, but that is what a lot of us were doing that night, and we got some very fantastic photos for people looking through the moon using their cell phones. It was very cool, and they're very excited. Of course, the highlight of the evening was this fabulous, this actual screenshot of her video on Facebook of an airplane, I guess, transiting the moon. It was very exciting, and everyone was yelling and commenting, and it was very, very fun. So great job, Sharife. That was super great timing. All right, so another thing that we had in January was the Wicklow Elementary Family Adventure Night. Unfortunately, this is when our luck started to run out, and we got some bad weather. So I set up indoors. I set up a telescope with some photos inside. And at the end of this long hallway, there's actually a little globe of the Earth for people to try and spot. And people get pretty excited when they actually manage to spot it, kids especially. So for anyone wondering, why come out on a cloudy or even slightly rainy night to do this sort of thing? Most of these events are rain or shine, and so when you come out and still give people something to look through, something to talk about, the event coordinators were greatly appreciated. And it's never a dull moment, as you can see. People really line up, and just the chance to look through a telescope at anything is pretty exciting. Now, I do think I skipped an event here. I need to give me 1 second to stop sharing. I just need to check my list here, because that's right. Yeah. So Leonard Ward, Eric Hoyne, and Douglas Wood had a very successful night on January 19th at Pinecrest Lakes Elementary or Academy. And they were able to look at Jupiter, Pleiades, Betelgeuse, and talk a little bit about the life of stars. Okay, so that was two of our good January events. I want to give a shout out to Eric Hoyne, who did his own launch. Is called Launch into Literacy at Lakeview Elementary, and he kind of handled that one on his own. I think his daughter-in-law teaches at that school, so he had an opportunity to go out there. So great job, Eric. Very cool. And let's see here. So unfortunately, we had our Canaveral Seashore got canceled. Our Star Party on January 22nd got canceled. We had just some really bad luck with the weather in the later half of January. But over in February, we've already had some things going on. We had the Great Claremont camp out on the 5th, which was again terrible weather. But let me share my screen here again so I can show you guys. We did have some great pictures come in though. I want to give a special thanks to Leonard Ward, Douglas Woods, Eric and Anna Jackie for going out anyways and setting up. They actually had a pretty busy night. Here's Anna, I think, with must be the event coordinator. I'm not sure what's going on in this picture. It looks like a dude dressed up as a robot. He almost looks like the Master Chief looking through a telescope. And so they set up these scopes and looked at street lights and moving cars. And as you can see, it was not boring or slow at all. There's very much good reason to still come out and participate, even if the weather doesn't seem too great. Although I certainly don't blame anyone for not wanting to drive, an hour plus to, an event if it's cloudy weather. So that's totally understandable. But yeah, pretty good event. The other event we had in Claremont earlier this month was the Preserve Astronomy Night. That one went a little bit better. Douglas Wood and Leonard Ward, they went out, and looks like a few people brought their telescopes out. These are not club members. These are just folks. Looks like we got somebody back here with, looks like a tiny little spotting scope, possibly, or maybe a pair of binoculars, but it's always exciting to see people bring their own scopes out. That's what it's all about. And my understanding is they got some views of the moon on this night. Now, let's see, what else did we have in February? We just did the, last night, my heroes, Bob and Ginger Leftwich, came out and was able to hold down the fort at this Winter Springs Elementary. It was a miserable, rainy, it was like mist rain, it was cold. And they were able to get out here before I could because I had work. And so I'm very grateful for them for doing that. We still had plenty of people. There's probably 100+ people at this STEAM night. And they were showing off this distant street light, which people it really wowed people when they realized they're not looking at the street light right in front of them. They're looking at the one that's like a quarter mile away on the other side of the school. So that was very cool. And I was able to speak with people about some astro photos that we had set out. And I did like a little quiz where I asked them, like, here's a picture of the moon, Orion's Nebula, and Andromeda Galaxy, which is closest to Earth and which is farthest away. And most people would get the moon as closest, but most people would actually indicate Orion's Nebula as the farthest away, probably because it was the most exotic looking. And so then I would explain that it's actually the Andromeda Galaxy, because we're in a galaxy, right? And that's a galaxy, it's our next door neighbor. So I feel like talking about distance, cosmic distances with people is important, because I notice it seems to be kind of that first step into people's gaining understanding of the cosmos. Usually when people come up to me in an outreach event and they ask me a question, or they present some information that is incorrect, or how can I say, a misconception, it's often about distance. People don't really have a clue as to, how far away, planets are compared to how far away stars and galaxies are. It's all just kind of a big messy concept to them. I actually had one lady ask me if the craters on the moon were stars, and she didn't understand that there are no stars in between us and the moon. The moon's the closest thing to Earth, and everything else would be in the background. So I will definitely be talking to people about distance a lot more. At the end of this STEAM night at Winter Springs Elementary, we got a very nice thank you card from our contact Missy, who's a super science nerd, and it has a very cool picture of a globular cluster. And I thought that was super awesome. I'm not sure if it's the same one that you showed off earlier, Richard. It's saying cluster 47 Tucanae in the southern sky. So I'm not sure if it was the same
No,
one, but
it's
not
not
the
the
same one.
same one. This one, that one is even bigger, and we can't see that from here at all. I would love to go south of the equator and just to see that would be, but no,
Yeah,
not the same as Omega Centauri. It's actually more impressive than Omega Centauri.
gotcha. Wow, that's crazy. All right, so one thing I did forget to mention was uh Derek had a successful night on Monday out at the Seminole County Library Sanford branch. And so he had his telescope set up out there, which is pretty cool. He originally, we were going to cancel, but that night cleared up, which is fantastic. And then I want to give a super awesome shout out. And this one actually really blew me away. Leonard Ward did just today. He actually did some sidewalk astronomy in his front yard. He had about like 12 people, and he was doing solar observation. And it's just a really great reminder that, you know, you don't have to wait around for emails to come in for events. You know, you can just set up anywhere where there's people and you feel comfortable and safe. And chances are somebody's going to be someone coming, you know, walking by is going to be pretty interested in what you're doing. So just make sure that you're doing it in a safe place where you're comfortable. You're not going to run into any trouble, and it's very inspiring. I definitely need to try doing something like that sometime. So a couple things to look out for later this month is, of course, we have we have a February moon party at Princeton Elementary this Friday. We already have a few volunteers, so we're pretty good on that. But you know, we're always welcoming more volunteers, so you can email me for that. You should have received an email from me on that one. We've got the Heavenly Love event at the M.O. Bueller Planetarium this Friday as well. That's from 7 p.m. to 10. They're going to be doing some Valentine's Day themed presentations at the planetarium. So we're looking for people to come and help set up outside the planetarium this Friday. Richard, you talked about telescope Thursdays at Kissimmee Lakefront Park. That's on February 17th. I just sent an email out to everybody on that one. So any volunteers we can get for that, fantastic. And then finally up in March, as Richard pointed out, we've got our Geneva Dark Sky Night on March 5th. And then of course the the CFAS informal start party. There's an Umatilla Elementary event on March 2nd, which I'm having a little trouble getting in contact with the person there. So I need to confirm that is still on. And once I do, I'll be sending out some help for that. And just a friendly reminder that for the Geneva Dark Sky Night on March 5th, that's open to everybody. It's open to the public. It's open to members who want to set up telescopes, members who don't want to set up telescopes. So, anybody that wants to come out and have some fun with that night, please do. I'm going to be sending out just a reminder over email shortly. All right, and that's just about it for outreach.
Thank you, Mauricio. Oops, for that update. I'm just gonna say it's clear. The moon is beautiful tonight. Go drag your scope out and have a look. I hope your scope is in the garage or the shed. Here's a free observing tip. If your scope is in the house and it's cold outside, your scope needs to cool off or the images are going to be kind of wavy. The opposite thing happens in the summertime. Your scope is in the air conditioning in the house and you take it outside and it will usually fog up immediately and may never actually dry off. So let your scope acclimate to the temperature outside. You will get the best performance out of it. And by that, I mean it could be just a lot better or actually usable, depending on the temperature differential. So there we go. Free, unscheduled observing advice at the end. So thank you again for joining us this month. A reminder, we will be virtual again next month, and we are hoping to meet back at the planetarium in April. Also, a reminder about our Chiefland Informal Star Party at the end of March. I am going to send out an email in a few minutes with the waiver and information on how to join Chiefland. Also, someone reminded me on the chat when I mentioned it earlier, the $9 or a night or $15 a night if you get one of the RV spaces. That is in cash. They do not have someone there taking credit cards. And they do not want checks. You basically put cash in a little envelope and you stuff it in a box. It's pretty old school. And make sure you pay. If a whole bunch of CFAS people show up and like 3 people pay, it's going to make all of us look really, really bad. So it is on the honor system, but we trust everyone's honor here at CFAS. And so with that, I thank you again, and everybody keep looking up. Go look at the moon. It's really great. Really, it is. And I will see you all in a month, at least. Good night.